There is a calculation that changed my life when it comes to property investing and predicting whether a property is going to have good capital growth or bad capital growth. My name is Thomas Regan. I'm a professional property investor here in Australia. Over the last 4 years, me and my wife have grown our property portfolio to the point where we've had a 20x on an equity position in 4 years. Now, the calculation that I like to do is over the period of time that property has existed, I like to figure out how much capital growth it has had over that time. And the way you can figure this out is, if you're in Australia, whatever the property address that you're looking at or whatever the market is that you're looking at, look at the properties within that market or the specific property that you're looking at, type in the address into Google and then type in history. Crazy, right? And that, if the property has sold multiple times, that will come up with all the history of the sales of that property. This data is critical to predict the capital growth of that area. And now, if you don't understand market cycles and gentrification and all the other things about property, you got to kind of consider that as well. But generally, you can get a very good gauge on how a property is going to perform if you can see how that individual property has performed over the last 50 years or how all the properties have performed in that market over the last 50 years. Now, for example, if you look at a property and in 1992 it sold for $200,000, and then you can see the same property sold in 2000 for $500,000, and then you can see in maybe you can see in 2010 that it sold for $1 million, and then you can see in 2020 it sold for $2 million, and then you can see in 2025 it sold for $2.5 million. If you know how to do the maths, which I'm not going to break out the calculator right now, you can track how much capital growth it's getting for that period of time. And you can also see where the market has dipped and slowed down and sped up if there's enough data. And you obviously, to get an accurate gauge on this, you have to look at a lot of properties in the market, because one property isn't going to tell you the true story of what's historically been happening in the market. But understanding this is critical, or it should give you a lot of confidence in understanding what the potential is of your property that you're going to purchase. Okay, so I'll just make a few points on this, which is good to just point out, right? So basically, you need to factor in, as I just said, market cycles. So, for example, same example, the property went from 200,000 in 1992 to 2.5 million in 2025. It's actually growing by somewhere about 7% per year, and that's just a rough estimate. I'm not using a calculator here. And if you guys want the calculation to figure out how much capital growth the property is getting over that period of time, just hit me up in the comments. I'll give you the calculation. But that property is growing by about 7% per year. Now, in my example, it was a very straight line in the price increments that it went up by. But what would be if there was market cycles present in this property market when in the last 35 years or whatever, what it would more look like, and let's just, for example, say the market was it was a type of market that went up, stagnated, and then went up again, right? So what would a market look like that went up, stagnated, and went up again? So in same property in 1992 it was 200,000, and then in 2000 it was again maybe 250, and you're like, okay, that's not too much growth there. That's not 7% as property is normally performing at. And then in 2010, it's 250,000 again. Well, this property is getting no growth. It's not a good investment, as it seems, right? And then in 2020, the properties, it's jumped up heaps to 2 million. and then in 2025 it's 2.5 million. Look, the end result, the starting point and the end result were the same, but what's different is this property's had a market cycle which has gone up, stagnated, and gone up a lot again, right? So if you look only from 2010 to 2025, it looks like this property's got a huge amount of capital growth. It looks like this property's got like 10, maybe even more percent capital growth. But that's not the actual fact of at how much it's growing per year. It's actually growing at 7% per year because you have to take that huge, more holistic view on how the market's performing, right? From the start of time till the end of time. So the property's grown by 7%, but what's happened is it's stagnated. There's been a market cycle, it's stagnated, and it's gone up again. Now, market cycles is a whole topic. I'm not going to go into that now. I've done videos on market cycles. Another thing you have to look out for when you search properties and how the price fluctuates is you got to factor in as well, like maybe the property was bought well, or maybe someone overpaid for it, and maybe the property was renovated and maybe it wasn't, right? So you got to factor those things in. That is why I like to look at a bunch. I can't just look at one property and go, yep, this market's going up by 7% per year. You have to look at like hundreds, maybe even more, if you want to get a clear picture of how the market's been performing and what the potential future of the market is. Look at a lot of properties. If you look at a lot of properties, you'll start to see a trend. Like, for example, hey, I'm noticing all the properties that were sold in 2010 in this area are stagnating. That's because the properties are all stagnating in 2010 because that was a point in the market cycle, right? And yeah, I'll just go back to renovations and underpaying, overpaying. You got to factor this stuff in as well, and how you would factor that in. I would say, like, look at the historical pictures of the property. If you can see, at different points the property's been renovated, you've kind of got to factor in that into your capital growth, because you're trying to get a gauge of what the capital growth potential is of the property, not if you renovated, but just like if you did nothing. I would prefer to invest in a property that's getting 7% growth per annum without renovations versus a property that's got 7% growth per annum with huge renovations, right? Another factor is you got to understand in property, it's not like stocks. You can't just buy all the stock at the same price on the day. It's a negotiation you have to have, and there's again market cycles which also will affect how the negotiation goes. So, like market value of a property could be $1 million, but it could be sold for $800,000, or it could be sold for $1.5 million. Okay, so that's a big range that you've also got to factor in when you're looking at these properties to gauge how much capital growth they're getting. But again, it's a numbers game. More numbers, more confidence, more data, more knowledge, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff, by the way, I like to do it manually. I mean, you could probably fucking find some AI to do it for you, but I'm not a super genius, and I like manually searching it myself because then I get a real gauge for it. I don't miss things that would probably be missed if I automated it. And again, I like it. So, but it gives me so much confidence when purchasing, and it also gives me so much confidence when predicting what a market is going to do. And with that confidence, you can make huge gains of capital growth. You can make huge amount of wealth. And as I have over the last 4 years, me and my wife, we've taken our capital position from $45,000 to $1 million in 4 years. We didn't have much money at the start, now we have a bunch of it, and that was all understanding this stuff. So hopefully it helps. See you guys next time. Bye.